What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today it's the Game Week 31 plus preview. There is loads to go through. By the time this goes out, there's not going to be too many hours until the actual deadline. Obviously, the deadlines are very quick at the moment, so loads to go through. Lots happening in Game Week 30. There's still lots of chips being played in 31. Let's get into it. Okay, so lots of these questions came from different people, and the which Wolves triple up is basically I'm picking Jimenez, which of the other two Wolves players I should have. And it's a pretty tough one. It mainly comes down to Doherty and Saiss, or Doherty and Jota, I guess, or Saiss and Jota, depending on what your budget is. Obviously, the best options are Jimenez, Doherty, plus one of the others. I think I would probably always have Doherty if I had the money. So really then it's between Saiss and Jota if we narrow it down even further. And a lot of it comes down to whether you're happy with other players in those spots, in those same positions. So for example, if you've got, let's say you've got Calvert-Lewin, Jimenez and Ings, are you happy with those three forwards? Well, if so, you don't really need Jota, and maybe you look at putting Saiss in instead. And the same with the defence. Like I've put a few wildcard drafts together, for example, and I think this is why this question's come in quite a bit, because people are wildcarding this week. And a lot of them have been 3-5-2. So maybe I've got Calvert-Lewin and Jimenez up front, so there's not really room for Jota. And at the back, maybe I've got Trent, Maguire, could even be Aurier, Doherty as well. So that's already 4 spots to fit into 3. So one other thing I would say before you even think about which triplet to go for is, do you have to triple up? Like I think people looking at how good they were in that first game, the fixtures that are coming up, I'm feeling that they have to triple up no matter what happens. And while I do think they've got really good options to triple up on, like I might even go for their goalkeeper along with Saiss and have Jimenez up front for my team. So I do think they are a good side to triple up on, but they're not essential. Like once you've got Jimenez, once you've got Doherty, sure, if you can fit Saiss in because you're not happy with other goalkeeper defenders, or if you want a cheap one, Saiss is only 4.6 million, then absolutely go for him. Same up front, if you're playing 3-4-3 and you've got a slot for another striker and you think Jota is the one, go for it. But don't feel like you have to triple up. In terms of like Saiss, I think is a really good option because he has attacking threat. We already saw him get bonus in the first game back as well. He's a little bit cheaper than Bolly, so you know I quite like him. With Jota, I think people are put off because he blanked in the first game. But that happens. Players blank in games. They don't get points every single week. They did play 3-5-2. They looked good when Traore came on, though, playing 3-4-3. So he was more down that right-hand side. Jota will probably start either way, either on the left-hand side or kind of more like an inside left forward, or as a centre forward in a 3-5-2. So I'm not particularly worried about that. He does often get taken off early as well, like 60-70 minutes, so we know that. So I do think he's still one of the better kind of budget options for a forward. But right now, if I was probably going to have to pick one, I'd probably go for the defence, just about. Talking of defence, Man United defence. Again, this question was posed a couple of times. Which Man United defender, Wan-Bissaka or Maguire? And I do think it really comes down to Wan-Bissaka or Maguire. You could make an argument for David De Gea if you really wanted to cover that defence and you had 3 or 4 defenders that you're happy to play every week and one of them wasn't a Man United defender. I do think you can make a case for David De Gea. He covers the clean sheet. He's the same price as them. Potential for save points as well. It's not where I would go, but you could go for that. In terms of the actual defenders, it really is between Wan-Bissaka and Maguire. They're the most nailed on. I think Lindelof will probably play alongside Maguire as he has done for most of the season. But Bailly could come in at some point. Lindelof also went off with a little bit of a knock. I don't think that's going to affect him. I haven't seen any news about that stopping him for the next game week. But it's obviously not a good sign. First game back and you're already picking up a little bit of an injury. And sure, the problem with him is he's not exactly non-injury prone, plus Brandon Williams can play there as well, so I probably wouldn't go for sure. So it really does come down to Wan-Bissaka and Maguire, and I genuinely think it is so hard to pick between them. I looked at the last 6 matches. Wan-Bissaka's created 6 chances, slightly higher, like really slight. It's like 4 baseline bonus higher than Maguire, so it was really minimal, and 1 shot in the box. Maguire's kind of the opposite. 1 chance created, 5 shots in the box, and obviously slightly lower on bonus. So I don't think there's a huge chance that one outscores the other massively. Like Wan-Bissaka's attacking threat is not huge down that right-hand side. He's not obviously known for his attacking threat. It's more for his defensive play. He is obviously trying to improve that, as every footballer would. So you could get something from him. Maybe because they're the same price, I'd probably just about go Wan-Bissaka if I had to choose between the two on a wild card right now, because I wouldn't expect a huge amount of attacking returns from either necessarily. And then if they're going to get clean sheets, then obviously you go for the one that's going to get the bonus points as well. So probably just about Wan-Bissaka. But to be honest, I've got Maguire and I'm perfectly happy for that. And if I was going to choose again, I probably wouldn't swap, because all I can picture is that header from a free kick or a corner from Fernandes, Maguire on the end of it, bam, there's your goal, there's your 15-pointer by the time he gets 3 bonus plus the clean sheet. Maybe that's a hope too far, but that's what I'm hoping for from Maguire. So I will go Wan-Bissaka on Maguire. De Gea if you really want to cover. Wan-Bissaka on paper is probably ever so slightly better. There's not really too much chance of him being rotated either, but Maguire is obviously completely nailed on if you absolutely want to make 100% sure that Wan-Bissaka is a good option too. Liverpool versus Man City premium options. So obviously Man City did very, very well over a double game week. I think they scored, 8 goals, 5 against Burnley, 3 against Arsenal. So pretty good start. Obviously we did see them rotate heavily in that Burnley game. It was almost a full new 11. I think the only 2 players that played in both started both were Mahrez and Ederson. Obviously we know Ederson's completely nailed on. Mahrez, obviously great for people that got him and started twice. Is he going to start the next game? Who knows? I don't expect Pep to completely change the 11 every week. I think this was because they'd just come back. We are obviously going to see some rotation. We've seen that all year round. I was a little bit surprised for De Bruyne not to play, but it's got FA Cup games coming up and stuff like that as well. So perhaps that was why. In terms of choosing between the two, it's a really tough debate. I think for now, for the next 2 fixtures, especially when Liverpool haven't quite won the league, I'd probably still be drawn to the likes of Mane and Salah ahead of Aguero. I mean, Aguero's probably injured now. He's probably maybe even out for the rest of the season. We'll have to wait and see. But before going for the likes of Sterling, I mean, Mahrez isn't really, you couldn't even say he's a premium option. He's really the price of like a Fernandes or a Martial instead. So I think De Bruyne is still a really good option because I think he'll play more minutes than not. But Foden's looks very good when he's come on as well. I'm not saying he's anywhere near De Bruyne's level, but he has looked good in the 2 games. And Pep always going on about wanting to play him more, and he's only 5.1. So until the league is wrapped up, I think Liverpool options are more safer for starts, like they always are anyway. So I think I'd still be drawn to Mane or Salah ahead of like a De Bruyne or an Aguero or Sterling or whatever it might be in that premium bracket. But given that, De Bruyne is probably going to start more often than not, and you're only really comparing Sterling as a big hitter, the rest of the options, if Aguero is injured, are actually a bit cheaper. So Jesus is similar price to Firmino. I'd probably prefer Jesus if Aguero is out. And like I said, Mahrez is a lot cheaper than Mane, Salah as well. So I think for me, for Man City, from game week 33 onwards, their fixtures get really good. And we might have, I know, I'm not going to say we can kind of guess Pep Roulette, but another 2 more game weeks worth of data, maybe we'll get a little bit more info. That will be 4 matches total. Let's see how many minutes Foden gets. Does De Bruyne play the next one and then miss the Liverpool game? That seems unlikely, but you just don't know. They've not really got anything to play for. At that point, Liverpool could have won the league anyway, I think. So there's not too much to worry. So right now, if I was like wildcard and stuff, I'd probably prioritise Liverpool players just about. But I don't think there's a huge amount in it. And obviously, next question comes up. No Liverpool attackers on wildcard. And one thing I will say about any player you're considering not getting for wildcard, do remember, you can get rid of them later on. You can make transfers. You can bring them back in if you didn't go for them. If you did go for them, you can get rid of them with transfers. So no Liverpool attackers on what? I don't want to use the word risk, but obviously we know how good they can be. But the next 2 fixtures are Palace. I wouldn't expect them to put a huge amount of goals past them. And then it's Man City, so that could be tough as well. So I think for the next couple of fixtures, it might be a good idea, or it's a viable option, I would say, to go with that Liverpool attackers, or no Liverpool at all. The problem is, like, Trent Alexander-Arnold still represents such good value. Until he starts getting rotated, I can see a big score from any kind of game for a lot less money than Mane or Salah. So in terms of attackers, yes, fair enough. Maybe you don't want to go for them for the next 2. And the thing about that is, they played Palace and Man City. You also know whether they got the league wrapped up, and you might even get indication from the next game after that about how much they're going to rotate. Now, the problem is that next game is Aston Villa, and if Mane and Salah both start that game, I would definitely want them in my team. So it's really hard to call. I think you can go with that for the next 2 and maybe then kind of assess how much they're going to rotate. Maybe Klopp will give us a bit more info and then decide whether you're going to bring them in or not. The other thing to think about is captain. Like, are you going to captain them this week against Palace? Are you going to captain them next week against Man City? I don't necessarily buy they're so expensive. If you're not going to captain them, you shouldn't have them. I don't buy that because you've got to spend your money at some point. But it is something to consider. If you're not, can you spread that money around a little bit further? So Liverpool versus Man City premiums, I still think I just about prefer the Liverpool boys, although I would want De Bruyne in my team as well. No Liverpool on wildcard. It's a little bit risky, but I do think at this point, at least for the next couple of game weeks, bear in mind we've only got 8 game weeks left. You've got to make these key decisions at some point. I do think for the next couple of game weeks, no Liverpool could be a decent option. So a bunch more stuff to get through here. I think this will be a bit more quick fire. So Aubameyang versus Kane was a question. I mean, my first kind of answer would be, is neither an option? But I guess if you're kind of hell-bent on picking one of them as a premium option, fair enough. Let's answer the question. So I think Kane has slightly better fixtures longer term, but Aubameyang definitely has, next two are pretty decent for Aubameyang. Southampton and Norwich. That Norwich game, like, you could even captain him maybe. I think if people are free hitting that game week, that would be game week 32. I think Aubameyang will be straight back into everyone's teams if they're free hitting. So I do think he's a good option over the next two. The thing about Harry Kane is, he has scored a good few goals over the last couple of seasons, but he has not looked the same player as he once was, and he hasn't done for a while, so that would put me off. Like, if I was going to try and get a Spurs player this week, I'd probably just want Son instead. He's cheaper, he's a midfielder, extra points for clean sheet, goals, etc. About as nailed on as Kane as well. So he's another option I'd rather have. In the Arsenal team, not really many other options I would want. So I just think, for me, I would probably, because Kane fixtures aren't awful for the next couple, West Ham up next is decent. I wonder if you just go for Aubameyang, because he did look good against Brighton, was probably a little bit unlucky not to score, and he's been so consistent that he probably will score in the next couple of games. If he scores 2 goals over the next 2 game weeks, I would not be surprised. So I would probably go for Aubameyang right now. I know you're talking long term, but there's only 8 game weeks left. There's a lot of points to be made up. Things are going to change over the next few game weeks because it's such a weird season and the way everything's come back. I don't necessarily know if we need to completely plan for the long term. Not in all situations anyway. So I think I would go for Aubameyang, see how Kane looks in the next 2. If he's showing some glimpses of returning to his former self and getting some good points, putting in some good performances, then maybe I would switch. But right now, I think I just prefer Aubameyang. If Kane doesn't look like an option and you want to get rid of Aubameyang later, maybe switch the money into midfield or something like that instead. Best budget options. I'll go through this really quickly. So defenders, I've got Taylor, who's 4.3 for Burnley. I do worry a little bit about Burnley now, not because they got battered by Man City, because they always get battered by Man City, and yet they still keep plenty of clean sheets over the season. But there's a bit of it doesn't really seem like there's a great atmosphere at the club right now. There's player contracts haven't been sorted out. Even Deitch mentioned that as well in an interview, which isn't really like him to kind of air the club's troubles maybe. I'm not saying it's a huge, bit of trouble for Burnley and it's going to affect them massively, but it's not what you want to be hearing when you're picking a player. So Taylor at 4.3, I'd probably actually maybe avoid him for now. He doesn't offer too much attacking threat either. And depends whether you need to play these players straight away. So like Everton's fixtures, Norwich is good, but then they've got a couple of tougher ones for the defence and then maybe better ones towards the end of the season. So Holgate at 4.3, Seiss at 4.6 if you've got a bit of money to spend. Robinson at 4 million for Sheffield United is good, but we really need to find out how long O'Connell is out for, because once he's fit, he's going to come straight back into the side. And then Lascelles at 4.3 million at Newcastle. They're the kind of budget defenders I would look at. Midfield, like Foden, now potentially an option at 5.1. Not quite in the lower than 5 million budget category, but 5.1, if he's going to get minutes in that Man City team, he could be a great option. Saka at 4.7, he's probably my favourite because he started both the first 2 Arsenal games in a much higher up position. So 4.7 for a midfielder looks really good. If you want to go super cheap, then Hayden at 4.4 million does play for Newcastle. Did get an assist this week, but wouldn't necessarily expect that every single week. But 4.4, he is a playing midfielder and about as cheap as it gets. So that's where I would look. In terms of best forwards, like if I was picking a wildcard right now, Jimenez straight on the list, probably Calvert-Lewin. Like I've just said for Everton, his fixtures are kind of good this week, and then there's a couple of tough ones, then better. But he's performed so well, so many shots, so many chances. I would still want him for that cheap price. After that, if you're going 3-4-3, you just pick another one. There's so many options. Like IU is really cheap for Crystal Palace. Granted, the fixtures aren't great, but for his price, you shouldn't expect a huge amount of returns anyway. Even Mopé looked all right against Arsenal, but again, Brighton's fixture's not the best. Callum Wilson, if you really want to destroy your team, maybe take a punt on Callum Wilson. But otherwise, like realistic ones, you got Jota I've already talked about. Jamie Vardy, I think it looks good if you've got the money to spend. It is quite a bit of money if you're pumping a lot into midfield. You might not be able to afford Vardy, but take a look at him. Same with Rashford, really. The thing about Rashford is you can get Martial playing up front for less money out of position because he's listed as a midfielder. It's the only thing that puts me off Rashford. Otherwise, Danny Ings, like the fixtures are not great. He's just gone up to 7.2 million as well. They're not amazing, but he's shown how well he can do in those fixtures already. He's already off scoring again, and he's just had such a good season. He could be an option too. So for me, it's Jimenez, Calvert-Lewin, +1 if I was picking right now. In terms of Leno replacements, I mentioned these quite a lot on the team selection video yesterday, so I'm not going to go into full detail. A bit like Taylor, I've kind of gone off Pope a little bit. Again, it is not because they got battered by Man City. I would have expected that to happen anyway. Maybe not 5 goals, but 3 or 4. They've done that a lot against Burnley at home. So I'm not necessarily put off Pope for that, but everything going on at the club does put me off a little bit. For the same price, you can get Foster at Watford. Fixtures aren't quite as good, but he could be an option. Very good defensively under Pearson. You got Dubravka and Newcastle. Their fixtures are quite good. He's 5.1 million. Only costs you like basically 0.1 million more than Leno would. So he's an option too. Martinez at Arsenal. I wouldn't expect huge things. The only thing that worries me there is I've already seen reports they're maybe going to look at bringing in Joe Hart because Leno's out. Now, I haven't really seen Martinez at Arsenal play that much, but he cannot be that bad where Joe Hart is a better option. But it would worry me if they're looking to maybe bring a goalkeeper in. How much do they trust Martinez? Or do they just need a backup? It could be that. So Martinez at 4.2 million. I know Arsenal are not necessarily the best defensively, but that is a very, very cheap goalkeeper to get into your team that gives you money to spend elsewhere. And Patricio is probably, if I wasn't so worried about having 3 outfield players for Wolves, and I still might go for him, Patricio at 5.3 million, getting in that Wolves defence, I quite like that option. Obviously, you've got premiums as well. I've kind of already talked about De Gea. You could go for Lloris at Spurs, although I'd probably rather have Aurier. And Edison is kind of guaranteed clean sheet at Man City as well. So he could be a good option, but costs 6 million. So it's a very kind of high amount of money. For me, if I wasn't worried about outfield players and who else I might get from their team, I'd probably go Patricio because I think their fixtures are really good. But I'm probably now leaning a bit more towards Foster. I can't go De Gea because I've already got triple Man United. So Foster, I think, if you want someone under 5 million. Martinez, if you want to go really cheap and just hope that Arsenal can get some clean sheets at some point. Otherwise, Patricio at 5.3 looks really good. And last question, which I've not put on there, which did come in. When to wildcard? Like, I think right now just seems the best option, depending on what your team setup is. Like, if you set up in Gameweek 30 to have kind of a decent team going forward, then maybe you don't need to wildcard straight away. You could leave it till Gameweek 33. That's when kind of Man City's fixtures get really, really good. Maybe you want to bring some of them in. But I wouldn't leave it too late. There isn't very many game weeks to go. The earlier you use it, the more game weeks you can kind of make use of it from. So I probably would lean towards using it this week. And obviously you do have, like, if you use it this week, there's 7 game weeks to go, 7 transfers. You can still make changes to that team going forward. But you can also get a really solid team that will do well over the next 2 to 3 game weeks, which is pretty much half of what's left of the season anyway. So that is when I will wildcard, I think. So captaincy, there are loads of options this week. I'm not even going to really look at the stats of the teams or the players because for a lot of players, he's only played 1 game. Same for a lot of teams. Like even Salah hasn't played any since the restart. I mean, yes, we can look at stats for the rest of the season, and I don't think they're completely pointless either. But for this, I'm just going to give you my opinions and thoughts on each one instead of going the kind of deep dive into all the stats. So Liverpool versus Crystal Palace. I mean, Salah, Mane, you could go Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I wouldn't really discount him as a captain option. Could they get a clean sheet against Crystal Palace? Absolutely. Can he get attacker returns? Yes, I think so. He's got a few this season so far. The only thing I will say, I know he got that 24-point haul, and don't get me wrong, the amount he attacks, he could do that again. But I think his highest return outside of that is like 10 or 11 points, which is not bad, especially when he's so consistently getting near that every single week. But it's not massively explosive that I'd probably want from a captain, if that makes sense. So I feel like, yes, his lower ceiling, I guess, or his floor is a little bit higher than everyone else's because he probably will get 6 or 7 points most weeks. But in terms of that higher ceiling, getting that explosive score, which we'd kind of want from a captain, if we can get it, then I probably wouldn't go for him. So Salah or Mane are options. I don't see Liverpool putting too many goals past Crystal Palace. That doesn't necessarily matter. Obviously, if they win 2-0 and your captain's Mane and he gets both goals, happy days. But obviously, you want to kind of target a team that can concede more, especially for a team like Liverpool, because the goals are kind of spread around a little bit more. So I think Mane and Salah are probably, if there is a standout this week, it probably is them because they're at home. They're trying to win the league. They're probably not going to rotate too much. We know how many goals they've scored already this season. But I don't necessarily think you have to target them. I think this could be a good week to go outside them because it is Crystal Palace and hopefully they'll be defensively tight. And maybe for a little bit of a differential, you could potentially go elsewhere. I'm looking at the Man United versus Sheffield United game. I think this is as good a time as any to play Sheffield United. They got no Egan, probably no O'Connell. I think Chris Wilder has already said it's going to be the same team, apart from they'll have to change Henderson and they'll have to change Egan, because one can't play against the loan club or the parent club, and one can't play because they're suspended. So it's a great time to play Sheffield United. Man United already put 3 past Sheffield United already this year, and I think obviously Henderson missed out. I think Egan did as well. So, and they haven't played well in the first 2 games. And Man United looked okay against Spurs, and you'd hope that Pogba and Fernandes will play. That will give lots of kind of creativity. Hopefully they'll be able to unlock that defence. So I'm going for Fernandes, because hopefully he'll take the first penalty. I know there's potential for him to share with Rashford, but hopefully he'll take it. All set pieces, likes to take a shot as well. Chances of assists as well from open play. So he's the one I'm going for. You could go for any of the others, Pogba, Rashford or Martial, because I just think that is a good team to tie. I think Martial could be a kind of game where his trickery in the box with his footwork could spell 1 or 2 goals. That's what he did. Like, people saying he didn't play well in the first game. This is the kind of type of game where he'll just come in against a weaker defence and just poach a couple of goals. So I do think there's options in that Man United attack, and I'm probably going to go Fernandes. That's where I am right now. I'm hopefully not going to change it. Spurs versus West Ham. Look, I wouldn't probably punt on Harry Kane at all, let alone on captaincy, but Son I think is a good option. People looking at Bergwijn for Spurs, but the problem is he's not. I don't think he's 100% nailed, not like Son is. So Son is where I would look for West Ham. I think West Ham have been so poor all season, didn't look great against Wolves either. And although Spurs opened with a draw, I think they played all right against Man United at times. So Son is someone I would look at. Wolves versus Bournemouth. I mean, Jimenez has got a similar thing to Trent Alexander-Arnold. Very consistent in his returns, but doesn't necessarily hit a huge score. So you probably will get something from him from Bournemouth, but will it be a double digit, like a 12, 13, 14 point score? Probably not. So I do like him as a kind of almost a definite returner. But outside of that, I probably want to try and target someone who can hopefully get a bigger score. I think even Doherty could be a better option than Jimenez, to be honest, in that Bournemouth game. So there is a lot of options in that Wolves team, but that's probably why I wouldn't target Jimenez. You've got Vardy versus Brighton, could be a good shout if you own him. You've got Aubameyang versus Southampton. I wouldn't write Aubameyang off yet. Like, he's one of the highest scorers so far this season, and he did have a good chance. Like, against Man City, fair enough, he blanked, but against Brighton, he did have good chances. He's definitely getting something against Southampton and Norwich, so he could also be an outside punt. And then you've even got Kevin De Bruyne, not even mentioned Man City. Chelsea are not exactly watertight in defence. They conceded to Aston Villa, and at times they looked like they could concede more. And Man City have kind of come out of the blocks just like as if there has been no break. They pretty much completely changed their 11 and absolutely smashed Burnley. Mahrez looks on really good form. Sterling looked good in the first game. De Bruyne looked like he hadn't stopped playing. Yes, Aguero's going to be out, but they've got Jesus, Bernardo Silva to come in. Like, their team is ridiculous. We know that. And Chelsea are not exactly watertight. So I even think that De Bruyne could be a good shout. So for me, I think the most obvious captains will be Mane, Salah. I think if you want to go something different this week, it could be the week to do it, especially if you own Mane or Salah or even both. Because even if they go nuts, you've at least covered their points as well. But I just think when they're playing someone like Crystal Palace, which isn't a dead cert for a high score, I think it could be a good week to go elsewhere. So let me know in the comments below who you captaining. So that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Much appreciated. I know that was a bit of a long one, but there was so much to go through. I probably didn't even get through everything that I needed to, but there was a lot of info in there. So if you did enjoy it, hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. If you want to follow me, Twitter, Instagram links are in the description below. And if you want to support the channel a little bit further, I do have a Patreon link as well. There'll be a new mini league set up for July, so make sure you get in on the action for that. There's also a Slack channel. You can come and talk to us about FPL, me and all the other Patreons as well. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. I might be back for a deadline stream tonight. Otherwise, I'll have all the normal content before the next deadline, which is Saturday. It's coming around so fast. Good luck in Gameweek 31. I hope it's a good one, and I'll catch you again soon.